All right, off into the last stretch here with Rose's next request. Rose is telling us, hey, we want to make sure CloudKix is familiar with the analytics functionality in Salesforce. Can you run through the basics of designing reports and dashboards with them? And of course, the answer is yes, absolutely. So first, what is a report? Well, a report is basically used to pull information that already lives in Salesforce, and the report allows you to summarize and aggregate, analyze that data in different ways. Now, whenever we are creating a report, then the first step is to select a report type. We'll talk about more what exactly that is. And we could also technically create a report by cloning an existing report and then just making some modifications. Every report has to live in a folder, and the folder has to do with security. So a report is not an object, a report is not a record, and therefore it has different security on who has access to it, and that is directly tied to the folder. So the public folder, if that report is saved in a public folder, then everybody has access to it. If that report is saved in the private folder, then only the person that has access to that private folder, meaning the person that created the report, will have access to that report. And if we put that report in a custom folder, then while it's a custom folder, then you have control over security on who has access to the folder, and therefore all of the reports and all of the dashboards that are in that folder. So that is one part of security. Can I see the report? Can I see the dashboard? That is controlled by the folder. Now, what I see on that report, that depends on the record access. So that depends on org wide defaults, role hierarchy, sharing rules, teams, manual sharing, all of those things. Okay, so think of the reports folder just as an additional layer of security that we need to consider when it comes to reports and when it comes to dashboards. And then those reports can be overwritten or they can also be deleted. Now, I kind of said the same thing about fields earlier, right? But with fields, I made this big deal that, oh yeah, but then you're losing all the data. And that is not the case with reports. So I hope when I talked about fields and modifying those fields or deleting those fields, I hope that I scared you a little bit, because that really can have far-reaching consequences. Reports, on the other hand, is basically just pulling information that already lives in Salesforce. So when you're overwriting a report or you're deleting a report, the consequences are not quite as far-reaching because you're not actually deleting any data. All you're deleting is that aggregation. All you're deleting is that view and the analysis of the data. Now, reports are the basis for dashboards, and so there could be obviously some implications, but they can all be rebuilt. It's like deleting an Excel table versus a pivot table. Yeah, you can kind of think of that way, right? So the data in the Excel spreadsheet is still there, but you just didn't like the table or the way it came out, so you kind of delete that and you just do it again. Yeah, exactly. Now, When it comes to creating a report, there's a lot of different questions that you should ask or you should have answers to before you really dive in and create that report. And I'm trying to move on to the next slide and it's not working, but I'm sure it's coming up soon. And so the very first thing that you need to determine is that report type. The report type determines what objects and related objects do you want to report on. That's what the slide itself says. And I've been teaching this for a while, so that's why I know what the slide says. But I actually think of it slightly different. I think of it that the report type determines the objects and directly related objects that we want to report on. Here it is. So the report type is all about what object and directly related objects do we want to report on. Okay, there's a reason why I stress that directly related objects, and I'll explain that in just a moment. The scope, the columns, that's pretty self-explanatory, but then I also want to talk about the format, because I feel like the report type and the report format, those are two things that are easily confused. The report format, we have 4 formats in Salesforce, always starts off with a tabular report. So when we're creating a new report, we first have to pick the report type, and then we basically get the information, the data displayed as a list. That's my tabular report format. It's a plain list. It doesn't really do a whole lot. It doesn't have any groupings, therefore you cannot have subtotals, therefore you cannot add a chart to it, therefore you shouldn't be able to, or you shouldn't use it in a dashboard. You can't create formulas. It's just a plain list. It's great for like a shopping list. It's great for an address list, right? That's what they're good for. But other than that, not great. And so oftentimes one of the first things that we customize when we end up with this tabular report is we add in a grouping. And the first grouping is always going to be a row grouping. And then we call that a summary report format, because we have a row grouping. So now we do have subtotals. And because we have subtotals, we can now add charts, we can add we can use it in dashboards, we can add summary formulas. Like now it unlocks a bunch of additional functionality. Now we can add a couple of additional groupings, and if they're all row groupings, it's still considered a summary report. But as soon as that second or third or other groupings is a column grouping, then we call it a matrix report. Matrix report, very similar to a pivot table in Excel, where we have a row grouping and a column grouping. And then we have the 4th format, and that is the joined format. Now, the joined format doesn't have too much to do with grouping or not grouping. The joined format, think of it as a report that you can create where we are showing different reports side by side, up to 5 blocks. So each block is basically its own report with its own report type. There is 2 main benefits or use cases for joined reports. The first one is if you want to show contradicting information side by side. So maybe you want to show open opportunities and closed opportunities side by side. You would want to create a joined report where for the first block, you go with the report type opportunities, and then you would add a filter to only show the open opportunities. And then you would create a second block with the same report type, again, opportunities. And this time in the second block, you would add a filter that says only the closed opportunities. And so then you would group it by account. And so you would have by account a list of your open opportunities versus your closed opportunities, something like that. So that's the first use case. The second use case is the reason why I inject the directly related objects in here. The second use case is if you want to display information from objects that are not directly related. There still has to be a relationship, but they're not directly related to one another. And so Remember when we looked at the objects earlier, kind of that visual graph where we had the account on top, and below that we had the contacts, and below that we had the cases, and below that we had the opportunities. So opportunities is looking up to the account, and cases is looking up to the account. So they're basically siblings, right, if you will. They both have the same parent, but they do not have a direct relationship to one another, meaning opportunities is not looking up to cases, and cases is not looking up to opportunities. And because they are not directly related, I cannot include them in the report type. So if I wanted to see opportunities and cases in the same report, I would need to create a joint report, add in my first block accounts with opportunities, and that way I have my opportunities in there. And then I would create a second block where I add a report type accounts with cases. And then I would add a grouping by account, by something that they have in common, right? And they have the account in common. So I would add the grouping by account. And so now I can see side by side for each of my accounts in one block, the opportunities, and in the other block, the cases. So my joint format allows me to show objects or records from objects that are not directly related. And so sometimes those two really work hand in hand to make the magic happen. All right, any questions about report types and or report formats?
Could you say again, with security, it's based on the user's profile or permission sets and what they can see in the report? Is that right?
Not quite. So if they can see a report, that depends on the report folder. And actually, I have the slide coming up right here. This is the next slide. So that's the folder sharing. So I can share the report with either users or roles and subordinates and public groups. And I can give them view access to the folder, and that means that they can see all of the reports in that folder and or all the dashboards in that folder. But they wouldn't be able to make modifications. If they wanted to edit, they would need to have edit access to that folder. And manage access just gives them access to the screen right here where they can modify who has access to the folder. Now that is the first step, right? Do you even have access to the report? Do you even have access to the dashboard? And that is dependent on the folder access. So now let's say I have view access to this folder that my report lives in. And so I can see the report. When I now click on that report and the report opens up, what I see, that depends on record access that I have in Salesforce. So that depends on the organization-wide defaults, the role hierarchy, sharing roles, teams, and manual sharing. Which of those many accounts that I have in Salesforce, which of those do I have access to, and therefore which of those show up in the report?
Okay, yeah, that's what I was like. They couldn't like see SSNs on a report when they couldn't see it on a regular screen.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking. So
yeah,
that covers it then. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Now, just to make it a little bit more confusing, but to give you a complete answer, is profiles completely out of the picture? It's really not, because if they don't have access to the object, then even if you give them access to the report, but they don't have access to the object, they actually wouldn't see it. And fields, the same thing. Field level security, which again, we can set on the field and the field permissions on the profile. If I'm hiding a field like the social security number field, and I hide that on the profile, then they would not see that in the report. It would just not be there because we secured the field, right? So we can't completely ignore it, but typically when it comes to what do they see when they run a report, what do they see? It typically is related to record access. Okay.
I have a quick question about that.
Yes. Go ahead.
Obvious somewhere, but if let's say there's a child records associated with a parent record and the parent record is restricted, does that viewing restriction apply to the child records as well? So normally a report might be grouped by a parent record. Would that just make the entire report blank for that person if they can't see the parent?
That depends on whether that relationship that they have is a lookup relationship or a master detail relationship. If it is a master detail relationship, they wouldn't see the children either, right? If the parent leaves, like I said with the baby, right? If I leave, I take my baby with me, you can't see me anymore, and my baby is gone too. If it's a lookup relationship, then they have independent sharing. And then it's not, oh, if it's a lookup relationship, then yes, they can see it. Then it really depends on the individual sharing.
Sure.
So they may or may not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, then we already talked about the report type. The report type, again, is that object and directly related objects, but it really controls a little bit more. So depending on what report type you select here, it then will determine which objects and therefore which fields are available. It will determine the default columns, and it will determine what filters are available. And they're based on the primary object. Now, the report type, as I said, is the very first thing that you need to choose when you're creating a brand new report. And once you have chosen the report type, then the report builder opens up. And then from there, you can, do all of your other customizations. Then you can start adding filters, and you can add and modify the filter logic. Technically, it's a hard-coded and, but you can overwrite the hard-coded and replace it with an or a not filter logic. You can also have bucket columns where you can group data on the fly, and you can add summary formulas potentially. So now you can actually customize that report. And if you have a grouping, then you can also add charts. Now there's a whole bunch of different types of charts. For example, a horizontal bar or vertical bar chart. Those are comparing items to one another. Then we have a line chart. A line chart is typically used to show development over time. Then we have a stacked bar chart, and a stacked bar chart would require at least two groupings. One grouping that is showing you the bar itself, and then the second grouping that kind of slices that bar into those different stacked slices right here. Then we have a donut, and donut is really just like a pie chart, except that in the donut hole, you can actually show the grand total, which is not something that we typically have with a pie chart. Then we have a funnel. A funnel is typically used to display processes like a sales process or a support process. And then a scatter chart shows you the correlation between two measures. All right, talking about charts, I need your help. Which one would you choose if you wanted to display which product categories brought in the most revenue this quarter?
Like a bar chart?
Yeah, bar chart would be a good one. Absolutely. Now, what if you wanted to show a comparison of revenue coming in from different sales teams over time?
Line.
Yes, over time is that line chart. And in this particular case, it actually would be a grouped line chart because we have different sales teams, which means we have some sales, different lines for the different sales teams. So we have the red sales team with the red line and the blue sales team with the blue line. So it would be grouped line chart, but line chart is what we use for development over time. And then number 3, a sales team's progress as they move leads from a trade show through the sales process.
Funnel.
Yeah, funnel would be the best answer. Excellent. Very good. All right. Now, we can also subscribe to a report. Subscribing to a report means that we are requesting Salesforce to take that report and generate an email, an HTML email that is being sent out. Now, there's 2 important pieces when it comes to the subscription. Of course, yes, you need to schedule it. Is it daily, weekly, monthly? Pick your day, pick your time. And it's the time, it will be sent within 30 minutes of that time that you schedule. So it's somewhat predictable. And the first important part is emailing. Who should receive the email? You can either send it to yourself or you can select certain people. Now, it's really important to remember that all email recipients must have access to the folder that the report is saved in. So you cannot send this report to random people. Okay? They need to be users, and not just do they need to be users, they need to have access to the folder and therefore to the report. The second thing is if we're sending it to a group of people, like we want to use this report for our forecasting call, for example, then we're scheduling it so that it is being sent to, everybody in the team, to the role and subordinates of the manager. But if our organization-wide defaults are set to private, then in that particular case, our users wouldn't usually see each other's records. And when you are subscribing to the report, then you need to select a running user. The running user determines whose data is visible on the report when emailed. So in this particular case, we're sending it to the entire team, and we want to run this report as Sarah Briggs. Sarah Briggs is the VP of sales, I believe. And if you think about the VP of sales, then that's pretty high up in the role hierarchy. So all the records owned by the reps and the managers and the directors, they all roll up to the VP. They all roll up to Sarah. So Sarah now can see all of those records, and whoever we're sending this report to, they will basically use Sarah's eyes. Salesforce will use Sarah's eyes to create the email. And that one and the same email is going to everyone that is subscribed to that, that report. So the running user is a really important concept. The running user determines whose data is visible on the report when emailed. Now, of course, you know what's going to happen, right? Tom receives the email and goes, "Oh, this is so cool. I can actually see what Sally is doing. This is great." So he checks out that email, and then he realizes it's an HTML email. It has hyperlinks. Oh, this is awesome. Best thing ever. Let me click on that hyperlink for the opportunity, Sarah's opportunity, right? So he clicks on that link, Salesforce opens up, and Tom can see an error message because the running user only opens up access for the report that is being emailed. It does not override the security, generally speaking, in Salesforce. Now, the running user is a really important concept, and I can almost guarantee you that you will get at least one question about that running user. So what questions do you have about that running user? All right, I see a different question here. Can a generic Experience Cloud user be added to access a report folder? Great question. The answer is, it depends. No, really the answer is there's no such thing as a generic Experience Cloud user. Experience Cloud users have licenses. And dependent on the Experience Cloud user license, the answer is yes or no. But it depends on the license that they have. So community, what was it? I think it was the customer community license cannot. Customer community plus license can access reports but not change them. Partner licenses can have potential full access to reports. So, define generic. It depends on the license. So the answer could be yes or the answer could be no. Yeah, good question, though. All right, well then, we are done with reports. Let's move on to dashboards. And the reason why we talk about reports before we talk about dashboards is because the dashboards are basically pulling the information from the report and then just visually display that information. So this right here is my dashboard, and a dashboard is made up of components, up to 20 components per dashboard. And each component, as I said, is pulling the information from that report to then visually display as a component. Now, we talked about the running user for reports, and it really only applies to reports when we're subscribing to a report. Dashboards is different. Every dashboard has a running user. Concept is the same. The running user determines what data is visible. And there was a third thing that I talk about. Oh, yes, refreshing. And it's really important to remember that whenever you go to a dashboard, you hit that refresh button. And I'm literally talking about a button, and they don't have it in the screenshot right here, but there's a button right here that says refresh. I'm not talking about refreshing your browser window or logging out and logging back in again. That won't do anything. You literally have to click on that refresh button. And the reason why you need to click on that refresh button is because that tells the system to run all of those reports, pull the latest and greatest information in each of those up to 20 reports, and then take the latest and greatest information from those updated reports and then display the visual. This can take a couple of minutes sometimes when you hit that refresh button. So let's say you hit that refresh button and 3 minutes later, finally, you have all the different components. Now it will be static until somebody else hits that refresh button, or you hit that refresh button again. It doesn't have to be someone else. It could be you again. You could technically sit there and just continuously hit that refresh button if you wanted to. But once it's refreshed, then it will be static until it is refreshed again. So whenever you look at a dashboard, it's always out of date. Now,
And
what
so
exactly?
it's refreshed for all the users then, is that right?
Yes, that is right. So it is refreshing the dashboard itself. It is not user dependent. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, where exactly is the information coming from? Well, remember earlier when I was talking about the 4 formats and that the tabular report should not be used on a dashboard? That is because a tabular report is basically just a plain list. It doesn't have a grouping. It doesn't have a subtotal. And that is what we typically use when we are pulling a report, or we're using a report to then create a dashboard component from it. So the source report has, or should have, a grouping and a subtotal, because that is the information that is displayed in the table or in the charts that you can add to your dashboard component. 2 exceptions, the gauge and the metric. Gauge and metric only show you one number, and that number is the grand total from the report. But typically, we're showing our groupings and the subtotals that go with these groupings. Okay. And then we need to talk about, yeah, you guessed it, the running user. Did I mention this is a really important concept? So the running user determines whose data is visible on the report, but only if you subscribe to the report. Otherwise, on reports, there is no such thing as a running user. Or dashboard, and all dashboards have a running user. The running user must have access to the folder in which the report or dashboard is saved in. Okay, so same concept for both of them. Okay. Now I have some questions for you. First one, NTO uses a private data model for accounts, and sales representatives only have access to those accounts they own. The sales director wants to automatically send all sales representatives a report showing all currently open opportunities and their amounts by account each week. How can this be accomplished?
If you set up a report and subscribe or give permission to the users to that report folder, and then set them up as a subscription.
Yeah, perfect. And then with every subscription, we need to determine the running user. How would you set up the running user?
There's like an option in there to run as yourself or something like.
Not on reports, not when you subscribe to reports. Now for the meeting and for this report, we want to automatically send out the email to include all sales representatives that shows all currently open opportunities and their amounts by account each week. How can we show all to our users, even though our data model is set to private? Who would be the running user?
The sales director?
Yeah, perfect. Exactly. It would be that sales director, right? Because everything rolls up to the sales director. So if we are using the sales director's eyes, basically their security settings, their eyes, and apply that to the report that is being sent, then ta-da-da-da, that would work. Fantastic. Very good. All right, number 2. Could the sales director show this same data to representatives using a dashboard component? Wait, what exactly are we looking for? We want to show all currently open opportunities and their amounts by account each week. Could we do this with a dashboard component? What do you think? Your chances are 50-50.
Yes.
Okay, let's go back. Okay, I want to go to the slide right here. So the answer is no, but I don't just want to say no. I want you to really see why it is no. So the report, right? If you look at this report right here, let's pretend that this grouping here is not by opportunity owner. Let's pretend this is by account. So it is grouped by account, and then I have my opportunity and the amount, opportunity and the amount, opportunity and the amount, opportunity and the amount. But when I want to display that on a component, I cannot show the individual amounts. All I can show is the grouping and the corresponding subtotal for that grouping. And that is why we could get pretty close, but we wouldn't be able to show the individual amounts, right? We wouldn't be able to show the opportunity and the individual amount. It would be the amount grouped together by account and summed up. Does that make sense? Let me go back here. So close, but not really, because we could show all currently open opportunities, not the individual opportunities and their amounts, but we could show the sum of all of the currently open opportunities by account each week. That we could do, but not the individual opportunities plus their amounts. Okay, Here is another trailhead list. And that's it for this lesson. Let's move on to automation. All right. Now, there are still a couple of references to those features that have been retired. So retired in this particular instance means that all support has ceased, but technically speaking, if you have old running workflows, they're still running. There's just no support for them anymore, and you can't create any new ones anymore. So we pretty much talked about all of those automation tools, except for workflow and the process builder. But as I said, those two are retired. So in this particular lesson, we basically talk about the approval process and we talk about flows. Actually, we talk about flows first and then approval processes. Ay, come on. Rose, I want to talk to you. Come here. I know my slide deck pretty well, but I don't remember the exact wording that Rose has. Rose, where are you? All right. So Rose has a requirement for us. She's really excited about everything that we have done so far. And hopefully she shows up here very soon, giving me direct instructions. But basically the gist is that she wants to just automate more and make life easier for our users. Here we go. So NTO has a lot of manual processes that take quite a bit of time to complete. Are there any automations that we could put into place to increase speed and efficiency? And of course, the answer is yes. And now there really is only Flow, and Flow is what we would use for those type of customizations. Now, Flow in that list that we just looked at is on the very bottom. So it is the last thing that you want to consider. You want to think about all the other things first that we talked about, like assignment rules and auto response rules and escalation rules and whatnot, right? Because technically, yes, you can create that with Flow and the Flow Builder, but that is not your best choice. So there's a lot of things that we can automate with Flow. And one of the reasons why Flow is the future and why workflow and the process builder have been retired is because flows can do oh so much more. So the record triggered flow, that is basically the type of flow that is replacing workflow and the process builder, because it launches when a record is created or updated, meaning when my users are hitting the save button, or deleted. This right here is new or is a superpower to Flow that workflow and the process builder were not able to do. Now, later, I'll explain a little bit more what this before save update is all about. I have a visual slide on that. So for right now, just know that the record triggered flow has the superpower of the before save update, sometimes also referred to as fast update option. Okay, but this is just one type of flow. Another type of flow would be the screen flow. Screen flow, because your users literally would be able to see a screen and interact with that screen. And I would say that there's probably two big use cases. The first use case is if you have a script, like in a call center, for example, that you want your users to see on their screen and just read off, right? So that's one big use case for the screen flow. The second big use case for screen flow is that we can give instructions, but we can also ask our users to interact with that screen, enter some information into that screen, hit next, show another screen, add some more information, hit next again. And so the flow would then take that information and behind the scenes magically maybe create a record or maybe update a record and would do something behind the scenes. But screen flow means that literally my users can actually see that flow. Then we have another type of flow that is the scheduled triggered flow. This launches at a specific time and frequency, and you all will experience that scheduled triggered flow on Monday, because you officially attended this class, right? You put in your attendance code. And so now your attendance record was added to a flow that on Monday we'll send out your vouchers. It's every Monday at, I forgot the time, I'm sorry, but it's Mondays when that scheduled triggered flow runs and sends out the vouchers for all students that attended the CRT 101 class for that previous week. Then we have an auto launch flow. An auto launch flow is automatically kicked off by something else, not a user seeing a screen, not a time, not a user hitting the save button. No, it launches when it's invoked by Apex code or by processes, although as I said, processes are being retired, by the REST API or maybe by another flow, right? So it's kicked off by something else. Then we have a platform event triggered flow, and that launches when a platform event message is received. Think of a platform event message as a message from some other system, oftentimes from outside of Salesforce, right? We can kind of open up that back door, that platform event message door, so to speak. And so we can allow those messages in, and those messages can tell a flow to go do its thing. And then we have the record triggered orchestration. And this is for very complex processes where we have multiple users and multiple steps that are involved. So we can create that record triggered orchestration. Now, these are just some of the core flow types that we have. There's a lot more flow types, like omni-channel flow, for example. There is the sign-in flow. There's lots of other flows, but these are kind of the big ones. So the very first step when you create a flow is choose what flow type you want to go with. And then based on the flow type that you select, you see certain elements. So the reason why I see the screen element here, for example, is because the screenshot was taken by somebody who chose the screen flow. If you go with any flow, screen is not an option. You won't see that in the elements. So the elements depend on the type of flow. Now, let's stick with the screen since we're talking about that right now. Let's say I add this element into the builder. Say I want to have a screen. So what does that screen show? Well, initially it doesn't show anything. So we now need to define the resources, and the resources will then determine what information will be displayed on that screen for our users. Let's say we add a screen and we add some resources in here where we say we have some pick lists and some information that my users are inputting into the system. And from that information, we want to create a record. So then after the screen, we add another element, maybe the create record element. And then we tell the system, okay, what kind of record do we want to create? And we need to map kind of the screen input fields to the fields that we have in Salesforce to populate that new record that is created. And so all of that is done through the resources that we're defining, and we're tying in with those elements. And depending on the user interface that you're using, at the end, you connect the elements and set the start element. If you're using the auto layout, which is the default now, you don't even have to do those last two steps. Now, when we are creating a record, you already know that things can go wrong. And when things go wrong with a flow, we don't really call it an error or an error message. We actually call it a fault or a fault message. And so if we're not proactive about possible faults, then my users would get this rather unsightly, an unhandled fault has occurred in this flow, talk to your system admin, good luck message, right? That's not super nice. If we're proactive and we say, hey, we want to create a record, but we know things can go wrong, let's be proactive and let's add an optional screen. If there is an error, then add in the error message. There is a default error message for that error screen that gives us at least a little bit of information. In this case, required field is missing. Well, that helps us a little bit more than this an unhandled fault has occurred. I don't know why, right? So this is somewhat helpful, but you can also now, since about half a year, now it's longer than half a year at this point. Anyways, you can completely customize that error screen. if you wanted to, if you don't like this, this default message right here. Now, hopefully, as you're creating that flow, you're spending quite some time running and then debugging that flow. And with the debug option in the flow, it literally runs through your flow, and you can literally see every single step and whether that step was successful or not. And if it was not successful, it typically gives you at least a hint. Sometimes it's more than a hint, but sometimes it's very specific as to what went wrong, and sometimes it's more kind of a hint. But at least then you know where the issue is so that you can then from there fix it. Now, when it comes to the screen flows, we need to deploy those screen flows, meaning we need to make them available to our users. They need to be able to somehow see visually that flow somewhere in Salesforce, right? Either on the record or maybe the homepage or wherever we want it. And so we system admins, we can deploy those flows either from a custom button or a link, or from a custom action. We can use a standard Lightning component or a utility item. Technically, we can start flows from processes, but again, processes are being retired, so kind of forget about that. And when it comes to deploying the flow, then again, we want to go through the debug and find as many issues as we can and solve them before we really deploy that flow. And every time there is a fault that happens, then a fault email will be sent to the last person that made a change to the current, the currently activated version of that flow. Because clearly they either didn't see it or they changed something that now is causing the flow, so they probably should go back and fix it. Now, our developers can create Lightning pages or Visualforce pages to deploy the flows. And our users, not just do they need to see it, but they also need to have the permission, the run flow permission, so that they actually can engage with that screen flow. All right, what questions are out there about flow? Okay, well then, here is Rose again. And this time, Rose is telling us, hey, the support director wants to confirm that we'll be following CloudKick's existing approval process for large refunds. Can you take a look and confirm what we have set up will meet their needs? And of course, the answer is yes, absolutely. Let's take a look. Approval processes are interesting because someone or something has to kick off the approval process, meaning someone, we have a button that they click and it literally is called submit for approval. So if they click that button in the user interface, or if we have a flow that clicks that button, then what happens is the record first hits the entry criteria of that approval process. Basically double checking, is there even a refund amount in the refund request, right? Otherwise, there's nothing for us to approve. So we wouldn't even waste anybody's time. Let's say that, yes, the entry criteria is met, meaning the refund amount, there is something in that field. Then we trigger the initial submission action. The initial submission action is TEFO, and we lock the record. So what is TEFO? TEFO means that we can either send out a task, TEFO, we can send out a task, and or we can send an email alert, and or we can update a field, and or we can send an outbound message. So that's where TEFO comes from. Task, email, field update, outbound message. Plus, we lock the record. So now that the record is locked, we send it into the approval steps. Let's say the first approval step goes to Tom. Tom looks at this and goes, oh yeah, no, definitely we need to refund. From here, it moves on to Sally. Sally looks at this and goes, oh yeah, no, we definitely need to refund. And because that particular refund request was extra, super large, we might also need to send it to Allison. So then Allison looks at this and she goes, oh yeah, we definitely need to refund. So that was the last step, and they all approved. So from here, we jump right to the final approval actions. The final approval actions are TAFO, and we want to unlock that record so that my rep can go back and say, hey, I got approval. Now I just need to figure out, do you want it refunded back on your credit card? Do you want us to issue a check? Like, how do you want that refund to be processed, right? Now that's in a perfect world. As you all know, we don't live in a perfect world. So let's go through the steps again. This time we're submitting, entry criteria is good, initial submission actions happen, and the record is locked. We're going into the approval steps. First step is Tom. Tom looks at this and says, oh yes, we should approve. Then it moves on to Sally. Sally looks at this and goes, oh, no, I cannot approve this. And Sally rejects. So now from here, even though it is an extra super large one, it never even moves on to Allison because Sally said no. From here, it jumps directly into the final rejection action. Final rejection actions are, you guessed it, TAFO, and we want to unlock that record so that now my rep can call back the customer and says, hey, I didn't get approval. I'm thinking that maybe I can get approval with like a little bit less. So what do you think? Like, what if we do X amount? Do you want me to submit that again and try and get approval for that refund? Yeah, all right, sounds good. So my user goes in, makes the changes, and then just submits for approval again. And the whole thing starts again. Now, approval processes work all over the place in Salesforce. So this refund request is just one example. Couple other examples would be the time off request, an expense report approval, discount approval, knowledge publication approval, you name it. Like, you can use it all over the place in Salesforce. And then here, this is just a nice slide with a quick overview of the different tools. It still has workflow, but indicating that it's end of support. So workflow and the process builder. Here's the approval step and the actions, and that's where you can see the TAFO. They just ordered it a little bit differently, but here's TAFO plus the lock and unlock of the record. We have quick actions, and then of course flow with the longest capability, just because flow can do it all. All right. What questions are out there so far? Okay, very good. Well then, once the slides decide to finally move on again, here we go. Let's talk about the safe order of execution. Now, what you see on the slide is the partial safe order of execution. In reality, it's actually a lot longer. So if you move on to like the App Builder course and the App Builder certification, you'll learn the full order of execution. But honestly, for admins, the partial order of execution is good enough. What it basically shows you is the different steps that happen to the record as the record is being saved. Now, the very first thing that I need you to understand from a terminology perspective is that when we typically talk about save and my user clicking the save button, that is the simplified terminology. That is not database terminology. From a database perspective, there's actually 2 milestones that need to happen when a user hits that save button. The first milestone is that saved milestone right here. You can see saved. Now, just because the data are saved does not mean we're done. There's more things that are happening, and we need to get to that second milestone, and that second milestone is called commit. And only if we get all the way to that commit milestone is the data really saved, like the user is thinking of saving that record when they're hitting the save button. So save in the user interface really should be called save and commit, because we need to get to save and we need to get to commit. Okay, so that's the first thing that I wanted to kind of explain, because from a terminology perspective, it's kind of a little confusing. Now, the order in which things are happening is nicely outlined here. So when my user hits the save button, then the very first thing that the system looks at is the system validation. Did you try to put an essay into that date field? If yes, dude, you're getting an error message. Try again. We're not even moving forward. My user gets an error message. They have to fix it, and then they have to hit the save button again. All right, so let's say they hit the save button. We're checking system validation. Everything is fine there. From here, we're moving on to the flow. The before save update. Wait a moment. Flows typically happen all the way back here, except if I use that really special before save update. And now you can also see why this is called before save. It is not referring to my user hitting that save button. No, it is that first milestone. It is happening before that saved milestone. That's why it's called before save update. All right, so maybe we're updating something before the save, maybe we're not. From here, we're moving on to custom validation rules. Are there any custom validation rules? Are there any issues? If not, woohoo, we finally made it to that save milestone. Saved is where the ID is created. This is kind of where the record is actually born, the ID is assigned, and the data saved. Not committed yet, but saved. And now with that saved information, we are running through the assignment rules and the auto response rules and the workflow rules and the escalation rules and the processes and the regular flows. And then hopefully we get all the way to the commit. And this is where the data are committed to the database. All right, that's in a perfect world. As you know, we don't live in a perfect world. So let's say my user hits the save button. And from here, we're checking the system validation. Everything is fine. Then we may or may not update something. Then we hit the custom validation rules. Everything is good. Data are saved. From here, we're running through the assignment rules and the auto response rules and the workflow rules and the escalation rules and the processes. And oh no, my flow just generated a fault. So from here, we're basically undoing everything. We're rolling it all back, all the way back. My user gets the fault message, and hopefully they can fix it and try again. Okay, so that is the save order of execution, the partial save order of execution. Any questions about the order of execution? All right, well then, here are some more links, and that's it. And that brings us right into our practice test. Now, as I said, the practice test is not really a test. It's more like an exercise that we're doing together, and it's meant to be fun. The way I usually do these is I read the question, you quietly read the answers, and then you send me a message in the chat area with the answer that you would have given if this would be an exam question. Now, if everybody gives me the right answer, we don't really need to talk about it. And I basically just move on to the next question. If there is an incorrect answer, either because you really didn't know or because you wanted me to take a little bit of time to explain it, and that's why you gave the incorrect answer, that's when I take the question apart, I take the answers apart, I talk a little bit about why this, not the other, right? Kind of depends on the question. But then I'll go through and I'll explain it to you. And then from there, I just move on to the next question. I'm not keeping track of your score. I just kind of want to see, what do we still need to fine polish? What do we still need to address? Okay. All right. Oh, come on. Here we go. Practice questions. It actually starts off with a pretty good question that I feel like is rather representative of questions that you potentially could find on the exam. Universal Containers has set the organization-wide default settings for accounts to private. Amy and Bob are on separate sales teams, but are assigned to the same role in the hierarchy. Amy is a member of the Sales West public group and needs access to all accounts owned by Bob, a member of the Sales East public group. How would Amy obtain access to only Bob's accounts? Very good. Getting a whole bunch of private messages here as well. Excellent. And it looks like you guys were almost unanimous. Most of you decided to go with D. Add Amy to Bob's account teams, and that is the correct answer. I had one B in the mix, so let me just explain this real quick. Create a sharing rule between the Sales West and Sales East public groups. The issue with this is that it says here, Amy is a member of the Sales West public group, indicating there are more people involved here. And need access to Bob, a member of the Sales East public group, indicating there's more people involved in this group, not just Bob. And so if you're creating a sharing rule between Sales West and Sales East public groups, then you're opening up access too much. The question is, how can Amy, only Amy, not everybody in that group, obtain access to only Bob's accounts, not everybody in that group? So B would open up access too much. All right, now a system admin has gotten a request from the accounts payable team for new fields to capture additional details on customer contracts. There are several standard fields on the contract object already that they could be possibly used instead of creating new fields. What customization options are available for those standard fields? Choose two answers. And I'm just closing a couple of those presentation slides, hoping that. Okay, I see a lot of B's and D's, and D is one of the correct answers. We can rename standard field labels in the user interface, but the other correct answer is C. Remove non-required standard fields from the page layout. That is, so C and D, here we go. C and D are the correct answers. Change the field type of standard fields. That is not possible. That field type is what it is. You can change the name, you can add pick list values, you can add a filter. So there are some things that you can change about a standard field, but the field type is not something that you can change. Not on standard fields. You are able to change that on custom fields, and then, you know, we kind of get scared because now we potentially might lose some data. But we cannot change the field type on standard fields. All right. Moving on to the next question. A system admin at Universal Containers incorrectly imported a set of lead records from a CSV file they received from the marketing manager. They need to remove some of those records from Salesforce quickly before users begin to work with the incorrect records. Which tool should an admin use to complete the task? Choose two answers. Yeah, very good. That looks very unanimous here. Perfect. So two answers, meaning B, the data loader, we can mass delete, and then mass delete in itself. Perfect. Oh, this one is another good one. The marketing team at Universal Containers is responsible for creating new leads and distributing them to different regional sales groups for qualification. How can a system admin automate this process? Yeah, very good. A lot of you decided to go with B. Create a queue for each regional group and a lead assignment rule to route the leads to the queue. Fantastic. B is the correct answer. I had a couple of C's. Let's take a look at C. Create a default sales team for each regional group. Oop, I stopped right there. Teams and groups don't work together, okay? So you cannot create a default sales team for a group. A default sales team could be assigned to a user, right? Like how I met my husband. So he was mine and mine alone, not part of a group, right? And so that's why the beginning part here is not correct, but it actually continues. It gets worse from here. And a lead assignment rule to route leads to the default sales team. Can't do it. Assignment rules determine the owner. And the owner of a record can only be either a user or a queue. Teams, groups, nothing else really can own a record other than a user or a queue. And so the lead assignment rule can route leads either to a queue or to a user, but not to a team and not to a group. And so that's why B is the correct answer and C is not possible. Now, what does the report type determine when a new report is created? Again, choose two answers. Yeah, very good. A lot of A's and C's, meaning the objects included in the report and the default columns in the report. There were a couple of B's, whether the report can be displayed in a dashboard. That has nothing to do with the report type. That has to do with the report format, because we need to have a grouping, right? So close, but it happens all the time. The report type and report format, those two are always confused. Oh, this is another good one. Universal Finance has segmented its customer base into two categories: high wealth and retirement. High wealth accounts should be visible to the high wealth sales team members only. Retirement accounts should be visible to all sales users. How can a system admin accomplish this? All right, let's see. We have everything from A, B, and C so far. And so let's take a look at it. The correct answer is B. So first, as I'm looking at this, I want to determine or realize that, hey, this is about record access, right? They're not talking about all accounts. They're talking about some accounts and some other accounts. They talk about high wealth accounts versus retirement accounts. So it's not all, meaning it's not object access, it is record access. And to control record access, we want to start off by locking down the organization-wide defaults to private, because there are some accounts that should not be seen by everyone. So we need to lock it down to private for everyone. And then create a sharing rule to share high wealth accounts with the high wealth sales team members public group. And the retirement accounts we're sharing with all of our sales users. So that is the best and really the correct answer. Now, let's take a look at A. Create a new profile. Now remember, profile controls object access. So all accounts or no accounts. And we create that profile for retirement sales team members. And then we remove read access to high wealth account records. Can't do that. Profiles and records don't go together. Profiles controls object access. Object access would be all accounts or no accounts, right? So A can't be true. And then let's take a look at C. Create a new record type for the high wealth accounts. I mean, you know, record types doesn't have anything to do with security, but from a user interface perspective, we probably would want to create a new record type for high wealth accounts and share the record type with high wealth sales team members. Can't do it. Record types are not used for sharing purposes. Now, technically speaking, could they be used? Yes, they could be. However, the very first thing, remember that slide with that fallen over triangle? The very first thing that we always have to do is we have to lock down the organization-wide defaults. And it didn't talk about that at all. So if we're sharing something, we would be opening up the access, but there's nothing to open up if it's already wide open because we didn't lock it down with the organization-wide defaults. So that's why C is not the correct answer. Typically, record types doesn't have anything to do with security. Record types controls the page layout, and record type controls pick list values. Now, an admin needs to prevent users from exporting reports. Which tools could the admin use to accomplish this request? Choose 2 answers. All right, as those answers are coming in, I just wanted to remind you about permission sets and the comparison to Santa. And that Santa never takes anything away. Santa never prevents anything, right? Santa always gives you more, and I don't know that they want more here. Hint, hint. So if you want to reconsider your answer, you can. Just like on the exam, right? You can change your answer. Yeah, very good. Very good. All right, couple people decided to go and change it to either correct or making it more incorrect, either way. But the correct answers here are profile and D, muting permission set in a group. Okay, so the big word that you need to watch out for is prevent user from exporting reports. We do not want them to, meaning we're taking something away. And yes, we can take something away on the profile. I think all of you decided to go with C. But we cannot take anything away with a permission set. Remember, permission set is like Santa. Santa always gives you more. You cannot use a permission set to prevent the user from doing anything. You can only hand them a gift. And taking away exporting is not really a gift. So that's why permission set cannot prevent anything. Permission set cannot be the correct answer. And then on the user record, we could potentially prevent the user from like managing campaigns if we're taking away a feature license, but exporting reports is not a feature license. And so that's why the user record wouldn't work either. Now, granted, identifying muting permission set in group, that kind of requires really kind of 2-3 steps that you need to think through. If we want to prevent the user from exporting reports, the assumption is that there's a permission set within a group that allows them to, and then we're adding the muting to prevent them. And in that particular case, muting permission sets in group would be the second correct answer. Okay. All right. Now, a system admin is creating new user records for a new hire class starting next week for the service team. The first few records created with no issue, but the last one is just not saving properly. What could be the issue? Choose 2 answers. Choose 2 answers. Very good. Yeah, very good. That looks very unanimous. Excellent. So A and D. The username was not unique. There is a user on Mars that is already using that username. And or D, a license is not available and you need to give some more money to Salesforce. Right? Those are the 2 correct ones. Now, universal containers set the organization-wide default settings for accounts to private. The system admin has added a new role to the role hierarchy. Users assigned to that new role need read access to accounts owned by other members of the role. How can an admin accomplish this? And this time there's only 1 correct answer. I see a lot of C's, and C is the correct answer. We would want to create an account sharing rule. Who owns the records that we want to share? People in that new role. And who are we sharing with? People in that new role. So account sharing rule is the best answer. Now, actually, let's talk about B. Somebody said B, add the role to the account teams. And there is a role. So when you are creating teams, whether that's account teams or sales teams or support teams for that matter, you have to create a role for them as well. That role is required. However, that role has nothing to do with the role in the role hierarchy. It's separate. It just has the same name accidentally, I guess. And that role also has nothing to do with security. This role, although it is required, all it does is it is used for reporting purposes. So you know how I teach these classes, but I'm not only teaching classes, I also work on projects. And then when it comes to projects, I have my PMP, so I wear different kind of hats, right? Sometimes I'm the project manager and sometimes I'm just kind of the helper on the side, whatever is needed and however much time I have. And so I wear all sorts of different hats. I have all sorts of different roles. Now, at the end of the year, my manager will basically run a report and say, okay, Katrin was, doing this many trainings, and she wasn't doing that in a team. But then when she was working in a team, I want to see what roles she has. Was she mostly the project manager, or was she mostly something else? So yes, there are roles with account teams, but these roles are just for reporting purposes. They have nothing to do with the role hierarchy, and they have nothing to do with security or giving access. They're only for reporting purposes. So thank you so much for answering that, so I could clarify that and explain that. All right, now the support team has a case record type for refund requests. The account owner should be notified when a refund request is entered for one of their accounts. What tool would the admin use to fulfill this requirement? Yeah, excellent. Very good. Let me just go through here. Almost unanimous with B, flow. Now, there was an assignment rule that snuck in. So A, the account owner should be notified when a refund request is entered for one of their accounts. It shouldn't be assigned. The assignment rules would determine who owns the record. Okay. But here we're just notifying. So the assignment rules is not used for notification purposes. It is used to determine the owner. And then I think somebody had D. Can't find it. I think somebody had D. Escalation rule. Escalation rule wouldn't work because although an escalation rule can notify, it doesn't happen when a request is entered. There has to be a time period that passes. An escalation rule doesn't do anything when a record is initially created. So flow is the way to go. All right, now sales representatives at Universal Containers perform the initial steps in the lead qualification process, and sales managers complete the final qualification steps. Universal Containers requirements include those listed below. Sales managers can access all lead status values. Sales representatives can only access the first 3 lead status values. Sales representatives cannot access the final 2 lead status values. How can a system admin meet these requirements? All right, so far I have some A's, some B's, some D's, and the correct answer is C. So we need to talk. use field level security to restrict access to the lead status, that might be possible. But here they're talking about lead status values. They're talking about pick list values. They're not just any pick list, no, the status pick list values. Okay, so field level security is securing a field, but it's the entire field and all of the pick list values, not just some. So field level security has no control over the pick list values, only the entire field or not, right? But it's all or nothing. It has no control over pick list values. And the same is true for page layouts, right? Yes, you could create two separate page layouts, and then you can have that one page layout that has the lead status field on it and the other page layout that doesn't have the lead status on it, but that's not what the request is. They're talking about the lead status values, the pick list values, and on the page layout, it's the entire field. It's including all of the pick list values, right? Pick list values are controlled by the record type. And we are not just talking about any pick list here. We're talking about the status field on leads and those pick list values. So those are actually controlled by the lead process, and the business process or the lead process isn't visible in any way to our users until we tie it in with the record type, and that's why C is the correct answer. Now, can I create a validation rule to prevent lead conversion? Absolutely, I can do this. So technically this right here is possible, but this has nothing to do with the pick list values and if somebody can see pick list values or not see pick list values. And that is really what the request was all about, right? It says here, cannot access the two lead status values. So this has not so much to do with the conversion or not conversion. This has to do with pick list values, and a validation rule has no control over pick list values. So that's why C is the only correct answer. All right, now it's important for universal containers to always convey a consistent message. When marketing reps talk with leads, they should follow a specific script written by the marketing manager. An admin is planning to take the script and create a flow with it. What flow element would an admin use to present the script? Yeah, very good. I see. Very unanimous. Yes. Lots of A's. This screen element. Fantastic. Now, Silvio, the team leader of the LACA regional sales team, has asked that his sales team have the ability to view the number of open opportunities related to each of their accounts while viewing the account record. Currently, they have to scroll to find that information and are reporting that it's taking valuable time while they're on the phone with the customer. Silvio wants to do everything we can to help his team meet their quota this quarter. How can a system admin accomplish this? Yeah, that is another one of those flavored questions, right? Where it could be A, custom formula field, B, roll-up summary field, D, lookup field. Something that's completely incorrect, right? So the correct answer here is C, create a roll-up summary field. Why? We want to pull information from the children, meaning the number of open opportunities. We want to have that displayed on the parent. So we're rolling it up to the parent and displaying it on the account record. Creating a lookup field from the account to opportunities would only show you the name of the parent. It wouldn't show you the number. It doesn't sum anything up. So therefore it cannot be D. It is C. Now, the accounts payable team would like to automate the creation of an invoice record on a custom object when an opportunity is marked as closed won. Which automation tools could be considered for this requirement? Choose two if you know the things that are retired already. Otherwise, if you only want to choose one that is currently correct, you can do that as well. Yeah, very good. So currently the answer is actually only C, the flow builder. This is a question that has been around for a little bit, and so that's why B would be the other correct answer, but the process builder is retired. A is not possible because workflow rules can only do TEFL. Workflow rules can only create a task, update a field, send an email, or send an outbound message, but it cannot create a record, an invoice record, or really any other type of record. And so A would not be true, but B and C technically would be true. But as I said, nowadays it's only C. Now an admin has imported a file of leads and noticed that some records failed during the import. What could have caused this? Choose two answers. Yeah, very good. Let me look through here. Okay. All right, yeah, lots of B's and D's, fantastic. So required field was not an import file, or a custom validation rule was not enforced. There were a couple of C's, the owner was not assigned. If you do not assign the owner and you are doing the import, then guess what? You're the lucky winner. You are doing the creation of those records. Granted, you're using a tool, but still, it is you. You are creating the record, and therefore, by default, Salesforce will make you the owner if you don't determine somebody else to be the owner. So it won't fail. It will just make you the owner. Lucky or not. All right. Which tools can be used to give an end user permissions in Salesforce? Choose two answers. Yeah, you're like, I don't want to answer this. Like, I got the other one wrong. And this seems so easy. This one is easy. Granted, really easy. So just almost too easy. You will not find an easy question like that on the exam. All right. Yeah, lots of A's and C's. Profiles has the permissions, and permission set groups has the permissions. Role hierarchy controls record access, and public groups are used for sharing purposes, although the groups themselves don't share, but they are used in sharing rules. That doesn't have anything to do with permissions, so it is A and C. All right. Oh, this is an interesting one. The support team at Universal Containers wants to reassign ownership of cases related to a new product that have not been resolved after 3 hours. These cases should be owned by Tier 2 agents. The service managers are also asking to be notified when and if a case changes ownership. What Salesforce tool can an admin use to most efficiently meet these requirements? Yeah. Okay, we have A, B, and D. And the correct answer is A. Just create an escalation rule. All these requirements right here, they're basically, it's the book description or the book use case for an escalation rule. Now, could we technically use a flow to reassign ownership of cases related to that product and send an email to the service manager? The answer is yes, we could. However, that is not the most efficient way of doing it because it would take a lot longer to create that flow, to run the flow, to debug the flow, to deploy the flow. Could it be done? Yes. And yes, A can manage the changing of the case owner. So escalation rules can reassign, meaning changing the owner, and or notify. Those are the two things that an escalation rule can do. Creating a process using the process builder is retired. So D, not a good answer. And again, it would be a lot more complicated. So even if the process builder would still be, it's kind of the same argument as with flow. Could this be done with the process builder, or could it have been done in the past with the process builder? The answer is yes. Not the most efficient way. It would take a lot longer to build that process. And again, check that process and all of those fun things. So A is the best way. Yes, an escalation rule can send emails as long as that email is internal. An escalation rule cannot send an email to the customer, but an escalation rule, yes, can send an internal email to a Salesforce user. Yeah, good follow-up question there. And that's what this is saying, right? The service managers are asking to be notified. So those are definitely internal people. All right. Now, the service team is reporting that case records are getting cluttered with components that are not always relevant. They want a more efficient interface with the most frequently used components at the top of the page. How can a system admin accomplish this? Yeah, fantastic. Very good. Everybody decided to go with A. Use the Lightning App Builder to make, rearrange, and or remove those components. Fantastic. Very good. Now, this next question is one that I will give to you, and I'll explain to you why. Which statement about the Salesforce mobile app is false? And the book answer is A. Custom fields, objects, record types, and page layouts are not available in the mobile app. That's not true. Of course they are. Now, there's two reasons why I gave you this answer. First of all, this is a double negative, right? Is false, are not. That's a double negative. You will not find mean questions like that on the exam. The other reason why I gave this to you is because of answer C. You can change an opportunities price book. No, you cannot. You can never change an opportunities price book except if you delete all the products, and then you technically could change the opportunities price book. But generally speaking, no, you cannot change an opportunities price book. And we didn't get a chance to talk about products and price books today, but they are fair game on the exam. So I just wanted to point that little piece out here, that opportunities price books cannot be changed. The reason why this is not the correct answer for this question is because it has nothing to do with the Salesforce mobile app. Opportunity price book cannot be changed in the mobile app, but opportunity price book can also not be changed in the desktop app either. They cannot be changed except if you delete all the products. Okay. All right. Last question. Maybe. Come on, slide deck. Here we go. A purchase order requisition is going through the approval process. For amounts over $10,000, a group of managers must all review and agree to the approval. What does the admin need to set up on the approval to make this happen? And all I can say here is follow your gut on that one. That one is an intuitive one. They all need to agree and approve. Yeah, exactly. It is C. We would need to require unanimous approval for those. All right, fantastic. Very good. So we are done with our questions, and I know that technically we're kind of running out of time. So very quickly, I have one last link for you. And this is a link that I actually would like you to click on right now. And I'd like you pretty please to fill out that survey right now before you drop off. So there's a link, there's the survey ID. There will be some questions. Well, the first couple of questions will be about me, the instructor. I always look for the text, meaning, you know, your actual feedback on what I could have done better. My manager is mostly interested in like the little bubbles that you're filling in, the little bullseyes. So 1 being not so good, 5 being pretty good. So please, pretty please fill out that survey. There will be additional questions on the technology that we use that will go to operations. There will be questions about the course content that will go to curriculum development. So Salesforce does take those surveys very serious. So please, pretty please take a moment and fill in that survey. And while you do that, very quickly, we'll run through these last couple of slides. And to be honest with you, most of this we have already talked about and covered anyways. We talked about the exam format. Registration fee is $200. Wait, if you haven't already signed up, wait until Monday until you get the voucher, because that voucher will waive the entire $200 registration fee if you use it when you sign up. The next is just a couple of tips, and there's only one tip that I want to add on that's not really specified here. So that you do not run out of time, I strongly suggest that you read through the question, then you read through all the answers, because remember, it's not the first correct answer. You need to pick the best answer. So you need to read through all the answers. If you know the answer, obviously answer and move on. If you don't know the answer, read that question one more time, read the answers one more time, and then see if you can maybe eliminate 1 or 2 of the answers if you don't know the answer, right? Justify, well, but this can't be true because, that can't be true because, so that you narrow down your choices and then just give it a guess and move on. Move on. Don't reread it again. Let go of that one question. It's just one question. It's okay. Keep going, okay? And if you do that, you will get through those 65 questions with plenty of time left. Now, whenever you're not sure about one of those questions, you can mark them for review. So at the end, once you're done with those 65 questions, you can then get back to those questions that you've marked for review. You kind of get an overview page where you can jump back to the ones that you've marked for review, and you can then focus on just those. And now you have time left over. So now you have time to reread it and overthink it and, you know, don't pull out your hair. But now you have time. So do that and you will not run out of time. All right. There's some links to further training and additional Trailhead prep. I already shared those links with you this morning anyways. The new certification experience really is just that you're signing up in Trailhead now, and we're using Pearson for certification. So it really is very similar look and feel. And with that, finally, here's my Q&A slide that I promised you 8.5 hours ago. What questions, comments, concerns do you have? What else were you hoping we would be talking about and we haven't talked about yet?
Just really quick, do you happen to have my email to share those links that were shared in the chat?
Yes, I do have your email, and I will do that right after class.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, very good. Well, I do not want to hold you hostage any longer. We already talked about the vouchers, and this is all that I have. Thank you so much for sticking all the way to the bitter end and even beyond with me today. Thank you also for those questions that you asked. It just makes this class so much more interesting. And honestly, I hope that this helped prepare you for your exam. If there's anything else I can help you with, please reach out. I am really easy to find on the Trailblazer community. I'm also really easy to find on LinkedIn. You can just, search for my name and I'll pop right up. So connect and then just ask your follow-up questions if anything comes up. Other than that, good luck with your certification. Fingers crossed, and have a wonderful weekend. Happy Halloween. Oh my goodness, wrong holiday here. I'm tired. Happy Valentine's Day for tomorrow. Have a wonderful weekend. If there's anything else, stay on. Otherwise, have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. Thank you, Catherine.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you too.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks.